NASCAR announced some major rule changes. Helio locked into the Daytona 500 now, plus the judge hands out a decision in the NASCAR 2311 lawsuit. Welcome back to Break Hard. I'm Matt. Some big news came out on Friday. It's still snowing here, snowing once again. Not happy about that because it'll be the fourth time this week I've had to shovel the driveway. At this point, maybe I do invest in a snowblower. I said I don't need one because it never snows. Apparently it doesn't stop snowing around here now. Also, got in my second 1/18 scale Garage 56 raced version diecast from Hendrick Motorsports, and just like the first one, it is also broken, so not ideal there. This was the replacement one that is for the one that was broken. So now I'm wondering if I'm going to get a replacement for the replacement. Either way, I need UPS to stop going all Roger Clemens and smashing it into the truck every time they put it in there, because I am assuming that's why the splitter keeps breaking, but we'll get into that. Some stuff we actually need to talk about, though, is some major changes that NASCAR announced on Friday. The damaged vehicle policy, well, it has kind of been completely rewritten. How it was last year is not how it's going to be in 2025. As it existed last year, once the clock ran out on pit road when you were trying to repair the car, if you weren't back out on the racetrack, your day was done. You were sent to the garage, pack it up, go home. You are DNFing out of this race. That is no longer going to happen. Now teams can take the cars back to the garage, repair them, and return to the racetrack to gain positions and to gain points. If the damaged vehicle policy clock runs out on you on pit road, then you just take the car off of pit road, go back to the garage area, fix it if you can, if you want to, and then come back out and rejoin the race. That is a massive welcomed change for everybody. We saw, and it didn't happen often, but there are certainly instances where the DVP clock ran out and those cars probably should have been in the race. They should have remained in the race. And there are certainly times as well where the cars were put on DVP and they didn't probably need to be there, and it kind of created just more of a headache than necessary. Also, cars with flat tires will be towed back to pit lane. Don't have to worry about being put on the hook and your day being done there. Josh Berry kind of helped spearhead that change, and NASCAR admitted that should not have happened, which we love some transparency. We love being able to admit that it didn't work out how they had anticipated it. And if your car gets towed back to the garage area, you are still allowed to work on it and come back into the race. Again, welcome changes. Big fans of that. Outside of the DVP changes, there's probably two other really big portions of this announcement that I think are going to get fans talking, are going to make some people happy, maybe some people upset. We'll start with the one that I think will probably be somewhat controversial to some people, and that will be the open exemption provisional. And you're probably thinking, what the heck is that? Think about a promoter's provisional at a short track, whether it be pavement or dirt, and they want to make sure that a big name makes the show. So they're like, okay, you're going to get the provisional here. Think about Dale Jr. at the South Carolina 400 back in November. Everybody showed up to watch this guy. We need to make sure that they're in the race. That's what NASCAR is going to be able to do for certain drivers, certain teams, if they apply for this provisional 90 days in advance of the event. Here's the thing. NASCAR confirmed on Friday that Trackhouse did apply for this provisional 90 days in advance. Granted, we didn't know that this existed. And that Helio, regardless if he qualifies into the 500 or races his way in through the duels, will start the Daytona 500 in February. Now, I know it's going to make some people upset. I certainly can understand why some people aren't going to like this. I don't necessarily have that big of an issue with it. It could possibly expand the field to 41 cars. So we got that. People want to go back to 43. I can give you 41 in certain instances. Yeah, it's certainly an interesting one at that. A different change. I'm sure a welcome change in some, instances, and one that's probably not going to be used very often because it only comes into effect if we go above a 40 car entry list. Obviously, the field is capped at 40 cars. Now we can go up to 41 with this provisional. I know some of you are probably wondering, well, what happens if they end up winning the race? Well, if they end up winning the race, that's great. They get to keep the trophy. However, they don't get any points. They don't get any prize money for winning that race. They are, however, all-star race eligible, though. So they can come back and run the all-star race, whether that be at North Wilkesboro or somewhere else. So yeah, I think that's going to certainly make some people question whether or not they should be there or this should be included. When it comes down to stages, if one of these OEP cars does win a stage, the stage points, they don't collect them. They will get credited with the stage win, but the stage points, though, for first place will go to second place and then on down. So kind of a shift there, kind of what I think some people have probably argued for the Xfinity Series when a Cup regular is running in it that's not eligible for the championship points in Xfinity. It's like, well, why are you letting those 10 points go to waste to them when it should probably go to the highest finishing Xfinity driver? I digress, though, because there's certainly some owner's points issues that come into that. Either way, Helio Castroneves, we'll see him in the Daytona 500. The next massive change will be with playoff waivers. You can call this the Kyle Larson rule if you would like to. Obviously, Larson missed the start of the Coke 600 and then ultimately the entire Coke 600 last year when he was in Indianapolis, completing the Indianapolis 500, which got started late because of rain. And then NASCAR made him sweat it out while they decided whether or not he should be granted a waiver for the playoffs last year. And now this year, as it currently stands, he can get that waiver, but he will lose all of his playoff points that he has already accumulated and could potentially earn. So he would start the playoffs with 2,000 points, which is the minimum amount of points to start the playoffs with, and then he can go up from there. But if he wins a race, guess what? Doesn't get those playoff points. So as each round resets, he just goes right to the back and is going to have to work his way back up to the front. It puts you on a massive hole. It is supposed to be a big deterrent for this. Also, if you get suspended, you lose all your points as well. Anything that is a non-medical reason for a waiver is likely going to make sure that you don't get those points, outside of it being the birth of a child as well as age restrictions. Think about in the truck series where we've seen some drivers miss the first race 2, 3, 4 before they turn 18 and they can run a whole schedule. Think about that. They will still be eligible. If they get the waiver, they will be granted their playoff points and everything like that. If you have the birth of a child, you'll get your playoff points. NASCAR is not going to be anti-family. That's certainly not the direction that they want to go here. But if you miss a race for a medical reason, whether that be COVID, breaking your leg, whatever, Denny Hamlin getting sinus infection or whatever he had a couple decade ago at this, I said about a couple of years ago, like literally a decade ago, you'll get your playoff points still from that, assuming that NASCAR approves it. That's a big time change. One that Kyle Larson's PR guy, John Edwards, didn't necessarily seem to be a big fan of, which I get. And his tweet was, Kyle, we know you're leading the race, but box. We have to retire the car because they have to take him to the Coke 600. And they've been adamant that he will be at the Coke 600 in 2025. So we'll see how all of that plays out. But that is a big time change as well, especially when it comes to suspended drivers. So don't right hook somebody and turn them into the fence. Carson Hocevar. Just don't do it, buddy. It's not worth it right now. And then we have the 100% rule. Obviously, that is a big time talking point, especially when we get to drafting tracks, Daytona, Talladega, and Atlanta. It was a big talking point last year at the fall race in Talladega when people didn't think that Kyle Larson was going 100% there at the finish to make sure that, he didn't push a Ford to victory. Yeah, I don't actually have an issue with this because NASCAR changed it from basically being the 100% rule to now, instead of, artificially altering the end of a race, to now manipulating a race. And that could be in the middle of the race, that could be at the end of the race, whatever. NASCAR was really, really pissed off at what happened at Martinsville, and they're making sure that that does not happen again. And I would imagine that now with the rule, wording tweaked, they will come down with a hammer if this does happen again in 2025. On top of that, NASCAR now also has the ability to penalize the OEMs, whether that be manufacturer points, monetary, the restrictions on testing, the restrictions on wind tunnel time, and the restrictions on CFD runs as well. So they're making sure that they have the course to be able to penalize these teams, these manufacturers, if they do try to manipulate the outcome of a race, like we saw at Martinsville last year, which was certainly a black eye for the sport. And as Steve O'Donnell said, it pissed him off, and it should piss him off, and it should piss everybody in the sport off, whether you're a fan or work in the industry, because it's certainly not in the spirit of competition. So yeah, that's a lot of things that NASCAR announced on Friday. They did not announce any changes to the point system, to the playoff format, anything like that. Jeff Gluck said that he reached out to NASCAR. They said that this is not, a sign that they aren't going to make any changes or that they are going to make any changes. This is strictly some rule changes that they were putting out. So we could still possibly see some of that. Typically, when NASCAR has made changes to the points system, it usually comes this next week coming up into January, somewhere between like January 17th to like January like 22nd seems to be kind of the consensus when they announce these changes. We'll see if that happens. But for now, one of the biggest changes resulted in Helio Castroneves and that Project 91 Trackhouse car being locked into the Daytona 500. Yeah, so Helio's going to race. We know that now for sure. Obviously, one of the biggest talking points leading up into the race would have been whether or not he can qualify on speed or whether or not he can race his way in through the duel. And it would have made for some really compelling storylines going into the weekend as, qualifying happens on Wednesday, duels happen on Thursday, and then we get into, the race on Sunday. Now that storyline has kind of been neutered for the most part. I'm not super psyched about it. Like, if we're being completely honest, it's like getting the spoiler for a TV show before it, you watch it and you're like, okay, well, what's the point of watching this now? Or like when you miss a race and you open up, your YouTube app and you see the winner standing there in the highlights and you're like, okay, well, there's no real sense of me watching the rest of this race. I know who won. Then it kind of, really drives down the excitement. However, there's still going to be a number of open cars that are still going to have to compete to make this race. So I think that it could still be somewhat compelling, but man, that would have been a big time storyline going into the weekend. It's a bit like the Indianapolis 500 having a 34th place provisional for Roger to be like, yeah, hey, we'll just put this car in because, we want them to be there. I get behind it. I understand the logic of it, but man, it would have been so much fun to watch him have to essentially sweat his way into the 500 here. So yeah, it's a bummer that that's going to happen, but for Wendy's, it's great because they know that they're guaranteed exposure into the weekend because Helio being in the race is going to be big news in itself. Like, that car will be on TV. For Trackhouse, they know they can put this whole program together, not have to worry about missing the race, which again, I understand all of that. And I understand NASCAR wanting to welcome in like new stars and, stars from other sports or those series and stuff like that. I get it. I 100% get it. But man, I wanted that storyline going into the weekend. So it's cool that he's in the race. Just kind of bummed that like that storyline has been sort of neutered in a sense. All right, the last bit of news before we head off into the weekend. On Friday, Judge Kenneth Bell denied NASCAR's motion to have the case with 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports dismissed. He also denied NASCAR's motion for those teams to have to post a bond. Neither of those will happen. This will move to trial. Discovery is set to end in September, on September 19th, I believe. Trial date is set for December 1st. Kind of knew all this was going to happen, right? If you read through what the judge said on Wednesday, it all lined up with this coming to the decision that he made on Friday. No surprise there. Fully expected that to happen. The judge so far has appeared to be very pro-team in this entire situation. The new judge. Judge Frank Whitney seemed to be more pro-NASCAR at the start of this. Judge Kenneth Bell seems to be more pro-team. We'll see how all of it plays out through discovery and then the trial. One of the reasons that he gave for denying NASCAR's motion to have this dismissed is the fact that he believes that there is at least one or more cases of anti-competitive practices that are happening here. So obviously, the judge does believe that the teams have something here, and it is worth having a trial. As he said in the hearing on Wednesday, he said that this case deserves to be heard, and it will be heard this year. So we'll see how all of it plays out. For now, NASCAR cannot be happy about this. The teams are probably very happy about it. They're ecstatic. In fact, they can go into the 2025 season knowing that they have this discovery period, a pretty rush discovery period too, if we're being honest. September is going to come very quickly in terms of, the amount of documents that they're going to have to work through and everything like that. And then getting into the trial on December 1st. Again, big time thing there. So yeah, NASCAR's not happy about it. Completely understand that side of things. Teams probably pumped. So let me know in the comments what you think about all the rule changes that NASCAR announced, Helio being locked in, and NASCAR's request to have this case dismissed, denied. Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on TikTok @BreakHard, as long as that's going to last. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram @BreakHardBlog.